Welcome back to the TimCo Retail Manager course. This course focuses on real-world application development. In this video, we're going to be adding a login page and a logout page to our Blazor WebAssembly project. This will allow us to test the authentication system and ensure it's working. From there, we'll create a small status page that will give us the details about who is logged in and what permissions they have. Now, if you're a Patreon subscriber at the $5 per month level or higher, head on over to get the source code for today's video. That will help you follow along and ensure that the code that you have matches what I do. Okay, let's jump into Visual Studio. Now, we're going to rough this in. We've talked about it before with our portal. We've been working on it. The authentication system, we kind of roughed it in, meaning we have some stuff in here that's hard-coded that I'm not real thrilled with, but it's the basics we need to get going. Well, it's the same things we get true today with the pages. We're going to create a very basic login page and logout page. Nothing complicated, nothing that is really flashy. And in fact, I want to redo these after we create them. But this allows us to very quickly get something working. And then from there, we can go to the next level of making something better. But always start with something working first. Otherwise, what happens is you concentrate so much on better, you miss out on whether or not it can be done that way. And then often you end up throwing out a lot of the work you did that wouldn't have been necessary if you had just tried to get the base thing working first. So we're going to create a page called login. Now, again, eventually what I want to do probably is I want to have, let's just start this up, by the way. Let's start this up. That way we can see what's going on. So let's hit F5 here once we've set the startup project as portal. And what we want to see eventually is that I want to see in this bar up here, I want to see who's logged in. All right. Now, right now, it's not even allowing us to get in because it's saying, hey, we're trying to authorize, but that's just not working. We're broken. No worries. But I want to see up here where it says, hey, you're logged in as Tim, I am Tim Corey, or you're not logged in, and maybe even have the login name and password box right in this bar. We just fill it out and hit submit right in the bar, and then it logs us in. That seems like a good system to have, really, really small, unobtrusive, not a whole page. But for right now, we'll create the whole page because it's simpler. So let's do that now, and hopefully we'll take care of this problem. If we hit F12 here and go to the console, it does tell you the problem on a handle exception, object not set to an instance of an object. So we've got an instantiation issue in here, which can be a little tricky to track down with WebAssembly. But I'm going to show you how to debug if we need to with WebAssembly, because there are tricks to getting into your C# code itself to find out where that instance is. But for now, not to worry, we'll dive into it when we need to. Okay, so let's create our login page. So add new Razor component, not Razor page, Razor component. Make sure you know the difference. Razor page is a different type of web page. It's a server-side only page that is very, very fast, but it's different from a Razor component, which is a Blazor page. So just so you know the difference, the .razor should be the extension, and let's call this login. And there's our login page. So let's start building this out. The first thing I'm going to want to do is under models, we have the authenticated user model and the authentication user model. The authentication user model is that email address and password. We're going to want to use that model and fill it in on this page. Therefore, let's create a private authentication model. Authentication user model, which gives me the whole path. Let's go ahead and cut that out and go to our imports and say using portal. Whoops, not portal.models, portal.models. There we go. And we will probably also have to add one for authentication as well. So let's just do it now using portal.authentication. And that's all the stuff to do with our authentication system. So with that in place in the import statement, now we don't have to have the full path. We can just have the name itself. And let's call this model and equals to new. And we can use the new syntax here since we're in .NET 5. The new syntax of just new instead of new user authentic or application user model. And the reason why is because it's kind of redundant to say private authentication user model equals new authentication user model. We know it's an authentication user model, unless it's not, unless you were instantiating a different way with a child class or a parent class or something like that. But since we're basically duplicating this word, instead of making this really long, we can just say new. And that does the same thing. So the other way you can do it is say private var model equals new authentication user model. But I like this way better because when you're scanning down the page, on the left-hand side, it says a type. And you don't have to see the type again to know that you're instantiating that type. All right, and we're going to have a private bool that is show authentication error. And we'll say false. And we'll capture the private string. Let's call this, just call it error. Or error text. Authentication. Error text, there we go. And since these are actually local variables, let's make sure we have the right casing for it. It often gets mixed inside of Blazor WebAssembly and Blazor Server because of the fact that you would have public properties sometimes. But since this is a private variable, we're going to make it lowercase. And then let's have one method here. It'll be a private async task of type, or called execute login. This is where we actually do the work of logging in. And that messed up my curly braces. There we go. And we'll say show authentication error equals false to begin with. That way, if you log in, but you have a problem, so it shows the authentication error. Then when you go to log in again, it's going to clear that authentication error and start over. So var result equals, and we need the authentication service here. So let's bring that in. Let's go to the top here and say inject authentication service. Let's just call it authentication. Let's call it auth service. That way it's named slightly different. But we're going to inject this from the interface. So we'll say auth service dot login. And we're going to pass in that user to log in with, which is our model. So I say, go ahead and log in and pass in that user we hopefully have just populated. And then if result is null, then we're going to show, actually, let's go do is not null. We'll start with the assumption that it is working. So if it's working, then we're going to redirect back to the main page. I think it's probably the best thing to do. So inject navigation manager. I'll just call it nav manager. This is built into Blazor, both WebAssembly and Server. And this is the way to navigate between different pages or different views. So we're going to say nav manager dot navigate to, and we'll navigate just to the root for now. Eventually, what I want to do is I want to, if this was a full page, I would want to navigate to the page that you came from. That way, if you go to a page where you're not authorized, it'll say something like, you're not authorized, and then we could either have a timed redirect, or what we can do is have a button that says, click here to log in, and it will take you to the login page, and then you log in, and it comes back to the page you were trying to get to. So that might be something we do. But if we have this in the bar at the top, then there's no reason to navigate anywhere. But this is a pretty standard for a full page login box. All right, else. So this is the failure. So the result is null. So we want to say our authentication error text equals there was an error when trying to log in. Now we don't have a specific error to show. That's just the error we're going to show for now. And then we're going to have our show authentication error equals true, not build render tree. True. There we go. Much better. And that's all the code we're going to need for this page. So let's talk about the view portion of it. So let's start with at the very top. We have our login. That's fine. Let's put a space there. Login as 2 words. And then we'll have our error message at the very top. If show authentication error, if show authentication error is true, or just show authentication error, then what we'll do is we'll put a div here with a class of alert danger, which is that red usually. And we'll say, and we'll say the role equals alert. Okay, and then in here, we'll put a paragraph that has just our authentication error text. So it's gonna pop up a bar at the top that says, hey, there's a problem, and tell you what the problem is. Okay, that's only gonna show if the authentication system has an error or throws an error. Now, let's create our edit form. So we're gonna say edit form. I have found it best to close out the edit form and then go back and put the details. Otherwise, it seems to have problems. So this is the model. The model is being called model. And then on valid submit, we're going to execute the login. So we'll only execute this method if it's a valid submit. Remember, we have on our authentication user model, we have that it's required with error messages if you fail to put it in properly. Well, if they don't fill something out, then it's not going to be a valid submit. Therefore, even if they hit the submit button, it's not going to try to submit that invalid information. And then let's put some styling here from Bootstrap. Class equals card body, and the background should be light, and we'll say MT of 5. That's just a little bit of styling. You don't have to do that, but I'm just trying to make it a little bit better than nothing. All right, data annotation validator. And let's also put the validation summary. Okay, this is just giving us the information about why the form is not submitting if it doesn't submit. Then we'll do a div class equals form group, and we'll say row to make the whole size. In here, we'll have a label. We'll say for equals email. This associates with the email field. Class equals call MD2, a medium 2 column, and call form label. And we'll just say this is email, like so. And then from there, what we'll do is we'll have a div with a class equal to call MD10 using the rest of the space. for our columns. We'll have input text, ID equals email, class equals form control, and the important part here is the bind value equals model dot email. So what's this doing? Well, it's creating a text field input that binds to our email address of our model. That's basically it. The rest of this stuff is kind of niceties and formatting that make it a little nicer to look at and view. And they also want to have, let's put our specific validation message. And we'll say the validation message for, I'm just going to include this here so you know how to do it. Model.email, like so. So what this will do is it will put the validation for just the email address below our input box if we have a problem. Okay, so if you don't put information in about your email address, it's going to yell at you and tell you why. Now, let's do this exact same thing again. Let's copy this, paste it again. And this time we're going to say the label is for password. And we'll say the name is password. The ID is password. And we also need to make sure that we specify that the type equals password. This is a HTML thing. And what that's going to do is ensure that we see just the dots instead of your actual typed out password. But let's unpin this. The form control, we're going to bind this to password. And the authentication message for password. That's it. So now that's our completed second entry. Whoops, not password email, just password. There we go. And then from there, we need to have an entry for our button. So div class equal to row. Again, this just takes up the entire width of the screen. And then in here, div class equal to call MD12, takes up all the columns in that row. And let's also say that the text is on the right. And we'll say button type equals submit. This is a special type of button. That's an HTML thing. Class equals btn-success. And the text is going to say log in. All right, so there's our entire form. So we have our form that's going to execute the login when you hit submit, and it's a valid submit. We have our checking for data annotation, and we have our validation summary at the top, and also validation messages for each entry here. We could probably get rid of the validation summary since we have it for each message, but let's keep both on so you can see both, and we can decide if you want one or the other. Again, this is just to rough it in and see how it works, but at the same time, I want to teach you how to build these forms out because this is something you're going to be doing in the real world. Now, there's one more thing we have to do, and that is the very top here. We have to say at page equal, oops, not equals, just a quotes and slash login, because we want to call this the login page. If you don't give it this page directive, then the user can't say slash login and go to the login page. Instead, what would happen is we need to use this as a control on a different page, which we could do. All right, so let's just run this as it is. We don't have the API running right now, so we can't log in, but we'll probably get that error message actually. So let's see if we can track that down first. Yep, error message. Okay, so here's the tricky bit. So just so you know, in Blazor server, or sorry, Blazor WebAssembly now, we do have under properties, launch settings, we do have this inspect URI line. You have to make sure this is here. This allows inspection from Visual Studio to our site. So you can put breakpoints in. However, what happens is the site has to get up and running, and then it will connect the debugging environment. So certain things cannot be debugged. So if we were to want to put a breakpoint in program.cs, we can't do that because this code gets executed before the debugger can attach to the process. So we have to check out this code right here to see if there's any problems, because let's go to index.razor. There is no code here, but let's just say, there was. We can put a breakpoint in here, but we're probably before this because there's nothing on this page that would throw an error. But yet it's on this page that the error is thrown. So it's something in here, which really, since we didn't change this or this or this, it's something in here. So let's see what's actually running and think through the processes. We aren't going to be running the JWT parser. That only executes when we actually get a token. Therefore, there's no reason that would cause a problem. The authentication service only gets executed when you're going to log in or log out. So again, I don't think that's the issue. The auth state provider is going to check to see if we're logged in or not right from the beginning. So I think this is our place to look. So let's shrink this down. Let's actually just unpin it. No, we can just shrink it down, it's fine. So the authentication state provider, well, we've got these three variables up here. We're pulling two of those in from dependency injection. The third one is just anonymous. But I don't think we initialize this anywhere. And that could be an issue because it might not, null might not be an acceptable solution for this. And doing a little bit of research on this, yes, that's the problem. In fact, some people asked me about that. I thought that we could just return null, which would indicate that we're, nothing, but we can't. We actually have to initialize this. So anonymous equals new authentication state. Inside here, a new claims principal. New claims principal. Inside here, new claims identity. And all of that, let's unpin here, all of that is just empty. So what that's going to do is it's going to have a new user with no information in there. No claims, no roles, no information at all in that claims principal, and therefore the authentication state is going to be that they're anonymous. They have, yes, they're a user per se. They're using it, but we have no information about them. So let's just start this again and see if that solved their problem. And at this point, you may be wondering, man, that seems like it's an awful hard way to set up Blazor WebAssembly, and it seems like that's a problem. And in some ways, yes, it is. And that's something that the team is working on having a better debugging process and system for. But in general, once you get your system up and running, you're not messing with things that are pre first page, okay? The setup stuff. Once you've tested it in your test environment and get it working, you just move over to your actual code and test it once, and then you should be good to go from then on unless you make changes to it. So it's not something that comes up as often as you would think, because now that we're in here, we can put breakpoints. So if we go to the counter page, and let's just on the increment counter put a breakpoint, and we'll come back to that page and go to counter and click, and we go right to the breakpoint. Not a problem. So that works just fine. It's only before the index page essentially loads. That's when we can't debug. So we can't put a breakpoint in program.cs. If we did, it will, let's start this again. It should change this breakpoint to be, yep, there you go. That empty circle, the exclamation point, this will not be hit, okay? It's saying, yeah, I can't talk to that breakpoint. So just note that that's an issue. All right, so our page is now working. And if we, let's take the breakpoint off here. I like completion. Now we go to this page and go /login. And there's our login page. So our login page, we can fill out some information. Let's just put Tim and no password, login. It says up here the password's required, and down here it says the password's required. If we take Tim off, now they all say, hey, you've got problems here, fix them. So we can either have it up here or we can have it inline down here. We probably want it inline down there. So we'll take this off, but just know you can do either one of those. So let's log in Tim and test, which is not a valid login in password. And we don't even have an API running, so it's going to time out even trying to talk to the API. So if we hit login here, it should be that it goes right to, let's refresh this page. It's not seeming to cooperate here for some reason. Oh, there we go. So if we go to and fill this out, hit login, it shouldn't do that because the website's not there. So therefore, it shouldn't come back here. We should be logging it. I think the issue here is that we're not throwing an exception we should be, or we're not catching an exception like we should be. So we'll address that in a little bit. That's kind of like a bug fill list, but let's get this working right. Let's get the happy path working and make sure the happy path is going to work. Then we'll come back and fix the problems on the not happy path. So let's go to our Solution Explorer, and at the top on Solution, we're going to manage our startup project, which is our set startup projects. And here we're going to choose multiple startup projects. We want the API is going to start without debugging. Normally we start the UI. Let's just leave it there. We're also going to start the without debugging the portal. And we'll move that down in priority. Notice I put the down arrow. So now the API is first. So the API will start, and then the portal will start. And we'll also start the UI library just so we can have it up and make sure that the API is working in case there's an issue where Blazor WebAssembly is not working, but we want to make sure the API is working. Let's start this again. This is going to start up 3 different things. There we go. We've got our login form is working, our Blazor page is working, and our API tab is open as well. Let's just log in first into APF, make sure it does in fact log in. It does. And if we go to user management, we can look at Tim and notice he has 3 roles, admin, cashier, and manager. Cool. So that's working. Let's move it off a screen. Our Blazor site, we can go down now to the login page, and we can try that Tim and test again and just see. This is just informational purposes. It does go right back here, so that's odd. Let's put a real login in and password in. We'll have to check out that error. It does go back here as well. We're not sure if it's trying to log us in or not, so let's do this. Let's go to our login page, our login.razor. And let's put a breakpoint in here and say, well, you know what? It's going, let's just see what happens here. And it's yelling at me saying that this breakpoint will not be hit. Because we did not start with debugging and enabled. Okay, not a problem. We can change that if we want. Let's do that. Let's change that, and let's track down this error and see what the error is. So we're going to go back to our Solution Explorer, set startup project. We'll change the portal to be start, not start without debugging. And we hit OK. I have had problems with debugging multiple things at the same time. So if that's a problem, then what you can do is just change the WPF to not debug or not have the debugging turned on. So our WPF project works like before. Cool. Let's move this off. There's our API separately. Let's put our breakpoint in here on the result. And in fact, let's go to the Auth service, Authentication service right here. And let's capture at the result right here. So right before you even grab the content, we're going to capture this information. And we can now go to /login. Go to tim@imtimcorey.com. Put my password in. This will be the correct information. And it goes right here to if result is not null, which means it's not even getting to our site. So something's not right here because it's not even getting to the authentication service, this right here. So we put a breakpoint one higher, I'm guessing. Oh, wait, it did get there. Aha, okay. So that's interesting, it got there the first time. Interesting. Okay, so we learned something. I'm not sure what exactly we learned yet. We learned something. So if we go to login and go to our correct information, we hit login. It goes here first, which is our authentication service where it's going to talk to our API. We're awaiting this. We hit continue. And it immediately goes to result is not null, navigate to. Aha, I think I know my problem. We are not doing an await here. This login method is an awaitable method. Okay, so we have, it's asynchronous and it's a task. So what we're doing is we're capturing the results of when we say await, it captures those results right away. And so it sends those back saying, okay, here's a task. And then you just wait until this task is complete. But what's happening instead is, let's go back to our login page here. What's happening instead is, since I'm not awaiting those results, I am getting the task of type authenticated user model instead of the actual results. I'm not awaiting here. Therefore, I am saying, hey, it's not null because it's a task. Therefore, we're going to navigate to the main page instead of waiting for those results and then getting the final value. So let's stop this. We know what the problem is. We're missing an await here. So we need to await these results. So we don't have the task in here. Instead, we have the result. Now, this is where var can burn you, because var was like, cool, no problem, I can do that. But if I had said authenticated user model, let's just do that. Authenticated user model, if I said like this, that's not going to work. And in fact, he's going to yell at me and say, you can't do that because I'm trying to convert that to a task. So because I used var as a shortcut, it's helpful in the fact that it's shortened my code. It makes my code a little more readable. The bad thing is it didn't protect me against myself. So that's where, I'm not against var. I like var. I use var quite a bit in the right spots, but it can burn you. And this is one of those places where it burned me. There we go. Let's try this again. Let's take the breakpoints. Let's leave the breakpoints in. Let's go to here and take the breakpoints out though. And we're going to start this all over again. And this time, hopefully the results should be null for a bad login in and password. So let's just do a bad one first. So Tim test login, result is null. So we hit continue. There's an error when trying to log in. Boom, there's our problem. We've got something wrong here. There's something that's not correct in our login name or password. That's what we wanted to work. So that's working. Now let's put in our correct information. And let's see, I don't think I actually clicked on that button. Oh, you know what? I think it's probably at the breakpoint. Result. The result, here we can look at the locals window. The result is an actual object. Username is Tim, I am Tim Corey, and there's a token. Therefore, we can take the breakpoint off and hit continue, and it will go to our home page because it's actually working now. But how do we know if it's actually getting the login information? We went back to the home page, cool, it's not null, cool. And we saw we had a token in there, cool. But how do we know that that token is correct and we can read it properly? Well, we can put breakpoints throughout the code, or what we can do is we can create our authentication test page. Let's create a page called Verify Auth. So Razor component, Verify Auth. This is a page you may or may not want to show to users. You may or may not want to keep long term, but this will validate for you the information about the user. Let's start by doing a private override. Oops. Sorry, protected. I wonder why that didn't show up. Protected override on initialized async. So we're going to, and that really messes up that format. I'm not sure why they haven't figured this out yet, but it's hard trying to synchronize all these different codes in one file. But this protected override async, what it's doing is it's allowing us to run code at the very beginning of our application. Right? So what we're going to do is in here, we'll put our code for checking the authentication state. So with that, we also need a cascading parameter. This is a parameter that's going to be passed into this page, but it's a cascading parameter, meaning it gets passed in from the system, not from us. So public task of authentication state. We can spell it, right? Authentication state. Auth state. And we'll put a get and a set. So this is a public property. It's important that it's public, not private, because parameters that get information passed in from the outside have to be public. So it's a public property called auth state. Now notice this is a task. It's not the result, it's the task because it may not be complete yet. So that in here, we're going to say var auth state equals await our auth state. So we're going to await the completion of this. And of course, we have to mark this async. There we go. Otherwise, even though your override doesn't say it, you have to mark it as async if you want to do async stuff inside of it. So now we have our auth state. We can grab our user information. So let's get the information about the user. We'll say private string username equals, well, let's just leave it empty for now. And we'll say that private bool is admin user equals false. Private bool is cashier equals false. And there was one other user, I forget their name, so let's do this. Let's run it real quick. I'm hard coding this for now. Don't worry. We will bring them in the same way we do the WPF application. But in here we have, manager. There we go. There's the 3 roles. Those are brought in through the API. We can get those in the future, but again, we're roughing this in. So I just want to make sure that we have something to verify our user's credentials. So we'll say, there we go, private bool is manager equals false. So now we're gathering the state right here. We can do some checks on the user. And we can say if, we'll say auth state dot user dot identity dot is authenticated. We'll check this first. So we should probably also put in here private bool is authenticated equals false. So if they're authenticated, then is authenticated equals true. And then we'll do some checks on their information. So we'll say is admin user equals, and we'll start from auth state dot user, there we go, dot is in role, and we'll say admin. We'll do this a couple more times. Only this one is going to be the cashier, and this is going to be a manager. And again, these are hard coded for now, but we can change these to be from the API and not hard coded in any area. All right, so is admin user, is cashier, and is manager. Now, let's do this. Let's take the username out entirely. We could bring that in a similar fashion. But I'm going to do it right in line up above just to show you a different way of getting information. Actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do it separately. So let's keep that in here. I'm debating because there's a couple different ways of showing all this information. I want to show you all the different ways of doing it, but I'll do all in one way on this page, and we'll show you other ways of capturing that data on another page, maybe a counter page or something like that, just to try out the different ways. So let's capture this information by saying username equals auth state dot user dot find first, and we're looking for claims type or claim type. There we go. Claim types dot name dot value. Now, you may wonder, well, Tim, it seems like it's an awful complicated system because you're doing a find first. That seems bad or wrong in some way because you already know what the user is, right? This isn't looking up the user. What this is doing is on the user, we're finding a claim. And the claim we're looking for is name. You see, the user has a whole bunch of claims on their record. Now, for us, they're very simple. There is the username, and then there is the roles that are applied. That's pretty much all the claims that we're putting on this user. But you could have a lot of claims on the user about information on their account. We could have their email address, their first name, their last name. All these could be claims. But in our case, we're saying just give us the name. That's all we're looking for. I want you to search through the claim types, find the claim type that is name. I want you to get the value from that claim type, and we'll use that as our username. So now up here in our HTML, we can say if is authenticated. Then we'll say, let's do an H4 tag. The user is authenticated. And let's actually change the user to be the actual name. So we'll say username is authenticated. And then below that, we'll say, let's do an unordered list. This is our bullet point list. And then in here, we'll say access to admin role is admin user, something like that. So we'll have this list of 3 bullet points below that will be for the admin role, the cashier role, and the manager role. And we'll grab those other two values like so. And this should tell us if they're in the specific roles or not, which just tells us that we're capturing that role information. Now, we're going to put an else here. And in here, we'll say H for the user is not authenticated. Cool. Let's run this. Oops, let's stop this. I jumped the gun a little bit. Stop, stop, stop. Okay, so we can't get to this page. We need to have a page directive that's going to be /verify auth. That's the name of our page. Now I can run this again, and this time we'll be able to go to that page pretty directly. So let's, oh, I think I closed my Blazor server page. It opened up multiple of these pages because Chrome remembers things, which can be helpful and can be not helpful. But our Blazor server page does take a bit to load because it's waiting for everything else to load. But now we have our Blazor server page here. And if we go right to verify auth, check that out. Tim at IamTimCo.com is authenticated, or is authentication. That's awesome. I do know English. Is authenticated, and he has access to all three roles. And you may say, well, wait, Tim, you didn't log in yet. And that, no, it's not a piece of camera trickery. Because we're using local storage, I am logged in. In fact, if we hit F12 here, and we go to our application over here, and then inside here, we'll have our storage. So you can see local storage right here. Inside there, we'll see auth token. And if we expand this out a little more, you'll see that, let's zoom in. There is our auth token, and there it is. That's the token, what it looks like. Cool. So let's do this. Delete it. Now, let's refresh this page. The user is not authenticated. So I've essentially logged out. Now, if I go to log in and I fill out my correct credentials and I hit log in, and now I go back to the verify auth. Now I'm logged in again. It's add that token back in. So we know that the login page is working, and we verified that the details are correct. But then we can go even a step further. We can log in a WPF, because in here we can manage the user. And let's take me out of the manager role. I'm no longer in the manager role. I only have the two roles. So if we refresh this, it still says I have the manager role. And the reason why is because we stored that token. And that token still says I'm in the manager role. We have not refreshed it yet. So if we again go back to our local storage under application, we again delete this key, and then we go back to the login page. We log back in, and then we go back to the verify auth page. Now, access to manager role is false. So there is that to consider, in that it thinks that we have access to the manager role, but we don't. Now, don't get too panicky here, because you may think, oh no, that's horrible, the sky is falling. They can have access to stuff that I've taken away from them. No, they really can't, because this is just for display purposes. When you actually do any manager calls to the API, when you provide the credentials, it's going to say you don't have access to the manager role right away, even if the UI says, yeah, you do, because you've taken away since they've logged in. So even though the UI is going to say, yeah, you have access to the manager role, maybe even shows the manager, menu options over here or something like that. Even though they have all of that, if they go do anything with that, it will say immediately, no, you don't have access to this. So you're not losing anything here or being somehow have a security flaw in your system because you're storing this token between logins of this page. So just want to point that out there. Okay, now we've been manually logging out, and that's no fun. So let's change this over to an automatic or a logout page. Now I think you're going to like this page. Right click on pages, add Razor component, log out. Let's make sure we don't forget this time, the page directive, log out. And we don't even need this H3 tag. Get rid of it. In fact, we don't need any HTML at all because let's just inject the two things we need. Inject the navigation manager and call it nav manager. And also inject the authentication service, call it auth service. And then in our code, we're going to say protected override on initialized async. And again, it's going to bork up my formatting. That's okay. We can fix that. And don't forget to add the async. Take this line out. We don't need it. We're going to say await auth service dot logout. Nav manager dot navigate to, and we'll go back to the home page. That's the entirety of the logout page. All we have is logout, and if we go here, whoops, I hit F12, and that goes to the interface for it. If I hit, I believe it's Shift F12, nope, Control F12. And I can't find it. So Shift F12 will find me all the cases where that has been created. And there's one right in this authentication service.cs file. So since I didn't know which one to go to, it couldn't do the Control F12. Sometimes when you're using the interface and there's only one type for it, it'll go directly to it. But in this case, it didn't. So I hit Shift F12, got the list of all of them, and then it knows I can go right to whatever one I find here. So logout says remove the auth token, notify the user of logout, and set the authorization in the header request to null. So that's essentially doing most of what I was doing with the delete the token. That's what this line right here is. But it's also making sure that our headers now for the API calls are also wiped out for authorization. So it's a better process than just deleting the token. All right. So now let's do this. Let's go to our nav menu. I'm getting tired of typing these things in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the counter since it's simple. I'm going to paste in two more. And I'm not going to worry about the icons for now. Let's just say log in, and we'll have the log out. And let's do one more. And this one's going to be the verify authentication. All right, so those are the three links, and they're going to go to not counter. This is verify auth. This is log out, and this is log in. That makes my life a little easier when it comes to running this application. Now, again, we're roughing this in because we would want to have not the login and logout show at the same time. We'd want whichever one is applicable, okay? So if we're already logged in, which we are, then we only want log out. Let's click log out. It went back to the home page. Let's verify auth again, not authenticated. Let's go log in. Let's put the password in. Log in. Go to verify auth. I am logged in now. Cool. So there's our login and our logout page plus our verify auth page for verifying authentication. I need to change this. That's just Tim Corey is authentication. Yes, I am authentication. No, I'm not. But let's go change that now because it's going to bother me otherwise. Authenticated. Cool. Now, I did say there's other ways of getting around this type of stuff. So let's play around with the pages that we're not going to keep long term, but we can use as a test bed for now. So let's go to counter. And in here is just a standard counter page, right? Well, let's put at the very top here, maybe right below the counter, we'll put the user is authorized or not and put their name. Okay, we could do it like we did with the verify auth page, but there's another way of doing this. We could say authorize view, like so. And in here we have authorized, and we can also have another entry for not authorized. We can put different code in here. So not authorized, we could just say, let's do an H4 tag and say the user is not authorized. Now, I'm still showing the page because we're just showing information about it, okay? But this is just a test, but this is what you put here instead of putting maybe all your page content in here. That's a possibility. So the user, and let's put in parentheses the username. So we'll say context.user find first, looks familiar? Claim types dot name dot value is authorized. Okay, let's fix this here. So let's get rid of that, and let's go to our import statement, and we'll just add this at the end using claims. That way we don't have to keep saying that long name. We can just use the shortened version of it, which also means that the verify auth page, we're doing this, we can get rid of that as well. Makes it a little shorter and a little easier to read. So the user, and put in parentheses what their name is, which is their email address, is authorized, or they're not, okay? So let's run this again, and we're already logged in. So it should be we don't have to log in again, but we'll do both. So let's go to the counter right away. The user, I am Tim Corey, is authorized. Cool. Let's log out. Go to counter. The user is not authorized. So it knows right away whether or not we are authorized based upon that tag. Cool. But there's more we can do here. For example, what if we didn't just want them to be authorized, they had to be authorized and a member of a certain group? Well, we can do that as well. So we can say roles equals, an authorized view. There we go. Roles equals, let's say, let's start with admin, because I am in an admin role. So we'll start this again. So it's not just about the fact that I'm logged in now, it's about the fact that I'm logged in and a part of the admin role. So, counter, user's not authorized. Well, it's because they haven't logged in yet. Let's log in. Now I go to counter, the user is authorized because I'm part of that admin role. Cool. Let's leave me logged in. The only thing we'll change is when we close this down, we're going to change this from admin to manager, which I'm not a manager. So let's run this again. And this time it should say that I'm not authorized. Let's check. So counter, the user is not authorized. But yet, if you go to verify authentication, I'm authenticated. I'm just not authorized at the manager role. So that's why I'm not authorized. It has nothing to do with me being logged in. It has everything to do with me being logged in with the proper credentials. So that's how you can verify that a user is logged in and or has specific credentials on a page. But wait, there's more. Let's go to our fetch data page. We've already kind of made some changes here. I don't want to step on toes there. Let's go to fetch data. Fetch data works. It's just gathering sample data for our weather forecast page. Okay, this is all generically created data, or I'm sorry, even easier, it's from our weather.json file. So let's do this. Let's say that they cannot get to this page if they're not in a certain role. So I'm going to say @attribute, and the attribute will be the authorize attribute. And we could leave it here. And if you leave it here, it's going to say you can't get to this page if you're not logged in. So if you're logged in, cool, you can go to the page, not a problem. We're going to take it a step further and say the roles equals admin. So only if they're in the admin role can they get to this page, which we know that I am in the admin role. Let's just log in. We haven't logged me out, so I'm still logged in. I still have my admin and cashier roles, but not my manager role. So if we go to fetch data, not a problem. Fetch data loads, no problem, because I am, in fact, an admin. But let's close this down and change this to manager, which I am not a manager. Let's go back. Let's run again. I'm not going to log out. I'm going to stay logged in just as I am. And let's go to the fetch data page again. Not authorized. Now, that's a pretty hideous error page, right? You may say, well, where did that even come from? Well, if you remember back in the last lesson, we had the navigation on our app.razor. And well, in here by default, we are just giving information for the authorizing view and the regular view. But you can also get information for the not authorized view and put in an actual control or a whole page of data in here for what happens when you're not authorized. Otherwise, you get the 2-word not authorized, and that's it. So with that, we've implemented our login page, our logout page, we've implemented our verify auth page, and we've seen the different ways we can authorize or not authorize a user based upon their ability to log into our system at all, and also if they're in the correct roles that we're approving for certain pages or certain areas. There's a lot we can do with this, and we're going to, because we're going to have pages that only show up in the navigation menu based upon if they're logged in or not. And we're going to have different areas that show up or not show up based upon who you are, if you're logged in or not, if you have the right roles or not, and then also what you can do inside those pages. Now, like I've shown, this is just user interface work. Even though we're storing the credentials between logins, which is very convenient, even though we're doing that, it is not granting them permissions they should not have if we change them at the server. When we change them at the server, they're changed right away, and you will not get access to the server-side resources. You may have some additional UI stuff for a while until you log out and log back in, or until you get your token refreshed, but that's about it. So it's not the end of the world. They're not going to see something that is sensitive because they are, taken out of a group, but they still have their token. So it shouldn't be a concern on that end. If it really is a concern, what you can do is shorten your token timeframes to a much shorter window and then have the refresh token work for longer. So that's a possibility we could look into in the future, but for right now, this is just fine, okay? So that's the login page, the logout page, the verify auth, and all the details around authentication. Now you've kind of got it roughed in. What we're gonna do in the upcoming videos is really make this layout better. We're gonna kind of fix some of the problems or the shortcuts we took in setting up this authentication system, because it works now. And since it works, now is a great time to make it better. And we'll make it, we'll refactor it to be the way you want and be able to be deployed instead of having those hard-coded API URLs and all the rest. Okay, so that's coming up, but I think we'll leave it there for today. I will commit this to source control. Don't forget, if you're a Patreon member at the $5 per month level or higher, go over and get the source code for today's video so you can have that to compare against what your application is doing. All right, thanks for watching. As always, I am Tim Corey.